Fellow tennis nerds, I'm here with a guy I'm sure you've seen on YouTube. He's one of the old schoolers, the old timers. He's been coaching tennis for a long time, been around on YouTube for a very long time, does great videos. He also has Real Tennis, which is a channel with actual competitive matches, which I think you should watch. And he's also written a book called Essential Tennis, which is doing well on Amazon and everywhere else pretty much. So welcome to the podcast, Ian.
Thanks, Jonas. I love talking tennis. I love especially having conversations with content creators. It's a very small group of people that's doing it full-time-ish and like really trying to do a good job. Really appreciate your content a lot. You're doing a fantastic job. So I'm looking forward to our talk a lot.
Yeah, me too. I always love talking to content creators in general because we face similar challenges, everyone, even though, I mean, you've been doing it for a long time. I've been doing it for it's getting better, like slowly, but it's been a process of learning, everything. And it's fun when you're out in these tennis tournaments and events. You meet a lot of different creators of from tennis, and we all seem to share the love for the sport, but then trying to figure out our own way in it. It's not that easy. So you've been doing this for a while. What are like the changes you've noticed in the last maybe 5 years or so? Like how it has changed your life, your career, and what's been the like journey for you on YouTube?
Man, so just keep it. Yeah, I've been doing it for 14 years now. I've been uploading videos to YouTube, so a ton has changed. In the early days, it was just a ghost town, and anything you uploaded, people would watch because just the novelty. In 2009, 2010, just the fact that there was tennis content, you would get lots of views just because you were trying. Like, it didn't have to be good. It didn't have to be well produced. It didn't have to be very engaging. Just the fact that you uploaded anything, you would get views because you were the only one doing it. So I would say probably around that mark, probably about 5 years ago, stuff started getting real in terms of there were always a couple of us, over the years. Will Hamilton started a little bit before I did. He's been a really big friend and mentor for me over the years. And before us, there were even websites. Tennis One, which is now, I think, not on the internet anymore, was before us. What's his name? There's another one as well. There's a couple websites that were publishing videos before us, but it was all old school walled garden. Like you had to put in your credit card number in order to see any of the videos. So Will was the first one to be like, I'm just going to post stuff for free. And then I started 6 months after him. And it wasn't until probably about 2016, 17 that a significant cohort of other coaches started jumping in and doing the freemium, kind of model where you publish as much valuable stuff as you can for free, build an audience, and then monetize that audience. And now, post-COVID, I think it's reached a saturation point now, and the results per unit of effort have definitely declined over the last probably 2 or 3 years, pretty significantly, I would say. And I think it's just due to a lot of people competing now for the same set of eyeballs all around the world. And this is the way it's supposed to be. Like it's open, it's democratized, it's free. And so people are finally starting to see the opportunity. Frankly, it's harder for me, and the business model is more and more challenging, but for the sport and for the game, I'm very happy and excited because it's what tennis deserves. And tennis in general has always lagged behind in terms of technology adoption and media and stuff like that. And so I'm happy that it's late, but at least it's starting to be like a real thing, what you and I are doing right now.
I've been put in like the racket space for a while, right? So it's like I've noticed that more and more reviewers of rackets, even in that very small segment that I'm kind of trying to get out of a little bit, because I think tennis is it's something I love in a much bigger way than just talking about gear, although it's been kind of a thing for me. And I see even there's like loads of reviews of every racket. People see that gets results, I guess. So it's what's happening. But you also made an interesting video recently that I watched, which is about why people not improve by just watching a lot of YouTube videos, which I thought was a very apt point you had there. Can you talk a little bit what went behind the scenes of you creating that video?
Yeah, I mean, the narrative that I tried to convey was the real impetus for the video, and that is I work with students in person on a regular basis. Those students are never local. I live in a non-tennis community. I mean, there's tennis here, but it's not a normal part of the culture. There's not really many tennis fans in my area. So the people that work with me almost always travel from out of state, sometimes out of country. And so it's generally my first time meeting them, unless it's a repeat student. And these people have spent years and years consuming everything that I create, along with tons of other pieces of content from other coaches that are doing a fantastic job and providing really valuable resources. And yet I notice a pattern of student after student after student after student all needing the same things, even though I've already created 100 videos about how to fix all those things. And so, frankly, it's just kind of gotten under my skin over the years of publishing more and more videos on how to fix the same set of problems that I see repetitively with my students. But student after student marches in the door, and I have to fix. I'm doing the same thing, the same drills with like different players from all different parts of the world. And it's like, well, you saw this video, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I know I'm supposed to do like X, Y, Z. And then I swing the iPad around and show them, well, you're not doing X, Y, or Z. So let's go ahead and do the drill. You know, it's like, it's gotten to the point where it bothers me that I've put in all this work and people believe that they're getting better. And just to be really clear, like the biggest criticism in the comments of that video is, well, I got better watching YouTube. Well, yes, people are getting better from watching lessons on YouTube, but the core fundamental essential, elements that need to change to make significant jumps in level, by and large, are staying stuck. And that's why I made that video. Just kind of call out the pattern that I'm seeing between the consumption of media and the changing of habits is not directly correlated. And I felt it was a really important message to put out there, since if you want to call it a problem, I'm part of the problem by continuing to produce and create and publish all these pieces of content.
No, I think it was a great point, because I think one thing that you highlight really well in the book as well is that to improve in tennis it's a head scratcher. Like, I mean, in the beginning you can make quick steps if you're athletic, if you have some ball ability. But once you reach a certain level and you play, for example, you easily get into patterns, which you talk about a lot, like you play the same guy, you play twice a week. It's not really room for improvement. You don't, try to work on those ingrained habits. Because I like the way you put it, that you really need to, like, the more you do a bad habit, the more ingrained in the system it gets, and harder it is to change later on. Like, and I've been a victim of that, and I think many players have all the time in tennis. It's such a difficult sport. And I think it's a very good point that you need to approach it pretty seriously to improve. You can't just like watch a video and, okay, I'm going to do this in my next match, because, tennis is not that easy to change. That being said, do you think that is one of the reasons, like, you've seen such a growth in pickleball and stuff, like, because tennis is so difficult? Is that like why pickleball is growing?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm kind of at heart a little bit of a pessimist and a little bit cynical, but I try not to go down that path publicly because I feel like I have a certain responsibility as a coach to lead by example and be positive and be inspiring and try to motivate and keep people like pushing forwards, because it is hard and it is a long journey, and making significant changes, it does take significant work and effort. So like nobody wants to hear negative, like pessimistic messages. But with that like caveat, I'll say that truly getting better at tennis is much harder than people think. And I would say humans, by and large, we want to take the path of least resistance. And yes, pickleball is much easier than tennis. It's a great game. I've played it. I've received some coaching in pickleball. I have no interest in like switching or having it take up any part of my schedule, because I still just love the challenge, the mental, the physical, the tactical challenge of tennis is just much, much more attractive to me still. As long as I feel like I have a little bit of juice to squeeze athletically, I'll always be drawn to the challenge of tennis. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. And it's part of why people want to be told that there's an easy path, and that's myself included. Like, if somebody knocked on my door today and said, "Hey, I could double your audience, I could double your email list, I could double your business tomorrow, just like sign here on the dotted line," I'd be very hard pressed not to sign on the dotted line. I'd have to read through that agreement very, very closely, because that would be super attractive. So I'm not saying this from like a condescending or judgmental, it's just human nature. So over the years, and I listened to a little bit of your interview with Nicola, and he was talking about, he just touched on this very briefly. He said something to the effect of, the lessons that I feel the strongest about, like, almost always do the worst. Like, it just doesn't get the views because it's something usually that's a little bit deeper, something that's a little bit more nuanced, something that takes a little bit more unpacking and explaining, and or requires a little bit more effort or work or like dedication to actually make it pay off in the end. And those things just don't have legs. Like, those ideas just aren't sexy. They're not exciting, and they're not going to get the clicks. And so that's one of my biggest struggles over the years being a content creator, is the hard things are what makes me the most excited, but it's what does the worst in an algorithmic landscape. And so, yeah, I think that's a big reason why pickleball you can start playing competently, even without a racket sports like background, in like 5 or 10 minutes, and you can have fun and you can enjoy it. And that's the whole point of a pastime or a hobby, is to enjoy yourself and to have a good time. And so I think it's easy to see why pickleball has taken off the way it has.
I think you made some really good points. I mean, I see the same sometimes with the content part of it, is that like you put a lot of effort into a piece of work. You do a long video, it's a lot of hours of editing or whatever. You're just the thinking behind it. And that's probably the worst ranked video you do. Or it's like you get like really disappointed, like, all right, so this is how the world works. I put in a lot of effort, and then I do a racket review video, which is relatively natural and easy for me. That's a much more interesting video. So that's a frustration. I think, like, in defense of tennis, and I do enjoy pickleball. I do enjoy paddle, which is extremely big in Europe. It's that tennis has the depth, and that things that require a lot of work are beautiful in a way, right? Like, it's good that it requires a lot of work. It's a healthy thing for a human being that is not super easy. I think in today's society, to strive for something that's challenging is a good thing. So I like when players, and I'm not like giving pickleball any shit. It's like, I like when players say, I tried this, I tried paddle, I tried pickleball, but I like the challenge of tennis. I see that happen sometimes. Completely. Do you see that as well? Like, people come back? Yeah.
Come back, like, after trying pickleball?
Yeah, or other sports. Yeah.
No, not a lot. So here's the thing. Like, I have a very thick filter between, like, the people that I spend time with are super fans of what I do. So they're like, everybody I work with is a lifer in tennis. Pending some kind of worst case scenario illness or like injury, getting sidelined against their will. The people I spend time with are all in. They're 100%, pot committed, and I'm super blessed to be able to be in that position, and to be able to spend time with people that are that driven and that dedicated. So I personally I don't work with people that are kind of like wishy-washy and like, oh, try this and try that. Yeah. So I'm very blessed. I get to work with people who are extremely passionate, and so I love every minute that I spend with people like that.
Yeah, I think that is the feeling you have to have when you're a coach, and that's the love that you bring every day, because otherwise it can be a quite frustrating job at some points, in trying to help people improve. But what would you say as a tennis coach is your main strength when you work with players?
My specialization is changing old bad habits. And so my average student has played tennis for a long time. I almost never work with beginners. I almost never work with junior players. My average student is probably like 55. Started playing tennis when they were a kid. Stopped playing tennis when they got into their like career and started a family, and kind of like was head down in like family and career mode for a while. Now their kids are older and they're making good money, and now some time is freeing up and they have some ability to invest in a hobby again. And they're thinking back about how much they enjoyed tennis when they were in like high school or maybe in college. And now they're picking it back up. They've been playing a couple years and they've plateaued wherever they're local, wherever they're from. They've already kind of been around the circuit, been to different clubs, worked with different coaches, and they're enjoying the game. They're happy they're back in it. But after 5, 6, maybe 10 years of working at it, they feel like they're just not getting the results that they should be, and they feel stuck. And that's when they come and see me. And that's like over and over and over and over again. That's the story that I hear. If you watch the content, the most boring content I publish is just me working with students. And I would say I specialize in being able to analyze somebody's movements and technique and how they swing the racket very quickly, because I've only taught with video for over a decade now. It's the only way that I teach. Be able to show them like very clearly, here's what you're doing now. Here's like an elite world-class example of what it should look like. Now let me give you some progressions to bridge the gap between what you're currently doing, what you've done for probably 20, 30, 40 years, and let's move one step at a time, like slowly but surely towards like a world-class way of doing this. And within an hour to an hour and a half, for the most part, I can get people like 3/4 of the way there. And when people watch me do that with other students, and they see the before and after of other people I've worked with, it's really motivating for people to come out and spend time with me, because we've all been in this position. Like I'm very much like, I'm not immune to any of this. I'm also human, and I have lots of my own bad habits that have been grooved for decades and decades and decades. And it really doesn't matter how much I know what I'm supposed to do. It doesn't matter how badly I want to change. The neurological pathways are set. They're there. They're very deep. And unless I put in both quality and quantity of repetition over an extended period of time, those pathways won't change. And so where most of my students feel stuck is they don't even know what they don't know. They've never seen themselves on video. They've never seen a comparison of themselves compared to a world-class example. And so they don't even know like they're taking lots of lessons, but most of those are very kind of surface level, and they're polishing the habits they already have. But the people that come and see me aren't interested in that surface level analysis. They want to fundamentally actually change. And that's a small percentage of tennis players, and why I feel so grateful that I get to actually spend time with people like that, lesson after lesson that I teach.
I know that like when people really smile because they changed something, like I was trying to help my mother who never really properly played tennis, and she got the forehand a bit better at one session, and like you see that smile, like it's like they won something on the lottery just because they can hit a spinny forehand suddenly, right? So it's like, so I know that's a great feeling and something you are great at getting as well. And you had some issues which I relate to with your one-handed back, and you tried to change that. How did you feel like the process was on your end when you were like on the other side of it?
So it's super challenging. It does, like I said before, it doesn't make it any easier how much I understand what I'm supposed to do. If you go back several years when I first started working on it, the biggest challenge is small changes feel really big. Like meaning small, meaning objectively. Like let's just say I do a poor job of rotating my upper body, and I always have. You know, for 30 years, I haven't coiled my upper body at all. So when I actually do coil my shoulders past my hips by, let's say, 5 degrees, it feels like 45 degrees to me because it's so much farther than I've ever turned before. And this is part of the problem. This is part of the reason why players get stuck, especially like normal everyday athletes, which I definitely consider myself one of those people, is when it feels big, but you're not actually moving very far, it's very easy to feel that first one, which will be better. If I turn 5 degrees more than I ever have before, it's going to be a stronger shot. And so when I feel that turn and I see the result, it's human nature to get super excited, to have that smile on your face that you talked about with your mom, and assume, sweet, that must be it. And I got it. and you're only like 10% of the way there where you should be getting. And so that's the hard part. And especially since video is not a normal part of the culture in tennis, not as a player, not as a coach, it's still weird, which is just incredibly frustrating for me. If I could snap my fingers and just change one thing about the sport of tennis, it would be to completely normalize the use of video. It's extremely frustrating because if I don't record myself, then I'm immediately going to assume I'm doing the right thing, because I've made a tiny change. And unfortunately, a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, since I've only made a small change, I'll probably inch my way back to what was comfortable before. And then a year later, I'm looking up and I'm in exactly the same place that I was before. And people repeat that cycle over and over and over and over again because it's so hard to A, change as much as you actually should away from your bad habit, and then B, do it enough times over a long enough period of time that you don't know how not to do it anymore. The reality is checking those boxes is actually very difficult. And so that was my experience. You know, I thought I was making progress. I would check the video and be like, well, hell, I'm not even close. And repeat. You know, try to go farther. Okay, it's a little farther, but I'm still not there. It's the same. It's the exact same for me as it was for all of my students. And the unfortunate thing is, I'm like in the meat of both my family life and my business life. And so I don't have realistically that I could do worse at business, or I could do worse at family, and I could do better at my one-handed backhand. And I'm not willing to make that trade right now. So it's kind of hard for me because I'm very competitive and I'm a perfectionist at heart. And so it's not easy for me to accept the reality of those like truths. But for the moment, it is what it is. And I'm more or less focusing on like doing the best I can with what I have at the moment, because the time that I have to invest in actually making substantive like changes in my game, it doesn't do justice to what's actually required.
Yeah, I can see that the trade-off being quite difficult to make. Like I want my one-handed backhand better, but I won't see my wife for for a while. Right? It's one of those tough trades, I would say. Yeah. No, but it's usually people have one stroke that is weaker, and I'm like, from the people I talk to, players I talk to, it tends to be the backhand. You know, it's not always the backhand, but it tends, I would say, based on my experience, being really like high up on the list. You know, but there are always ways around it. You can always work on something. You can always slice the ball. You can also play serve and volley, which you do tend to do quite a bit, and you're really good at it. You have a really good serve and a volley. Is that something you're seeing more, like on the pro level, among like amateur players? Like, do you miss that part of the game because it's quite rare these days?
I do miss it. I'm another like personality trait of mine is I'm a gambler. I enjoy the action. I enjoy the risk. It's like a game of chicken, you know, like you and like another like athlete basically like just driving head to head, like right at each other, and it's like who's going to blink first. So both in terms of playing tennis and watching tennis, I love the excitement of it and like the dice rolling like element of it. And you just don't know until you do it, like whether or not it's going to work, both in a macro sense, like in terms of like over the span of a whole match, but also like point by point. It's hard because if you have like a 30-second blip of like concentration, you can lose a bunch of points really fast playing that style. So I totally understand with how the courts have changed, with how the technology has changed, with like gear and equipment, with how the athleticism has totally changed over the last couple decades. I understand why it's gone away. But yeah, I do miss it, and I still love doing it. And I'm not going to stop doing it, especially in doubles. I'll serve and volley in doubles until I can't walk anymore.
Makes sense, I think. No, I agree as well. I also miss parts of that because I think it creates a contrast in styles. Usually you have a player trying to pass another player, and then there's one at the net. So you have this kind of dynamic feeling of tennis. You know, sometimes tennis today can be a little bit too much baseline grinding, you know, from two players, and it's not maybe the same product to watch then always. So that would be my point of view. Getting back to video, there was one thing I wanted to comment on there as well. Like when I video a lot, and that's helped me improve quite a bit. And I think both you and I have talked about the importance of putting a camera behind you to improve as a player. It's not that hard. Like, you can have a cheap tripod, cheap smartphone or GoPro, whatever. It's so easy to do, but people, what I've noticed, like, people don't want to do it because they're maybe either lazy or they're afraid of what they're going to see. And I've seen that, like, when I've shown footage to players I've just hit with, who are generally, like, see themselves as pretty advanced players, and I know how the horror show that my tennis can be. You know, I know well what I'm gonna watch. You know, but for them it becomes like a shock, right? It's like, no, but I'm Roger Federer. What is this? What am I seeing? Is that something you encounter as well? Like, when you show players, like, this is how you actually look when you hit the forehand or backhand or whatever.
Yeah. I'm going to steal the phrase "horror show" to describe my game. I like that. It's good. So I've been doing this so long now, and again, I'm very fortunate. Like, I said before, I've got like a really big filter between me and the people that come and see me. Generally, the people that come and see me, they've watched me long enough and they've consumed enough of my content that they know, like, they already know. Like, they might not feel good about it, and they might be kind of anxious and a little bit like afraid, like, to see. I would say probably 25, maybe 30% of the players who come and work with me have already seen themselves at least a little bit, which is super high compared to, you know, the just general population of tennis players. And the 70% of people that have never seen themselves, I would say probably 50% of them, they're coming to see me just because, what you said, they just don't want to do it themselves. And it's like, well, you know, I could learn about angles and tripods and cameras and like framing and, like, you know, getting it set up. So, like, people think that they have to make it a lot better than it really has to be for it to be valuable, I think. And also, there's, of course, that fear of, like, sometimes it's more helpful to have somebody else tear the Band-Aid off instead of doing it yourself. So I would say probably half of my students, that's a big part of the value I'm giving them, is they're coming to somebody who, that's all they do is this type of analysis and revelation of, like, here's what you're actually doing. And they've watched me long enough that they know I'm going to deliver the news in a very respectful, like, gentle way. And so it's going to be, like, as positive as it could be. And that's definitely a big part of the motivation, that why people come and see me. There's no question about it. Yeah, what was your question? I feel like I got off track a little bit.
No, you answered it perfectly. Like, it's that the sensation they get when they see themselves. But I think in a good way, like, that when they work with you, they know they're actually investing their time and effort into their tennis. And also for you, then you have a better experience as a coach, because it's never good, like, people who coach kids or the juniors, even pretty good juniors, sometimes get the feeling like, okay, he doesn't want to be on the tennis court, or she doesn't want to play tennis. I played with like players who are top 10 in Europe in their age, like 15-year-olds or whatever, and they don't even want to play tennis. Like, you talk to them afterwards, like, no, it's my parents who wants me to play tennis. And they're, like, a good player. Yeah. So it's a fascinating part of, like, also the tennis kind of parent and student relationship. But one thing that you've talked about a lot, and that I agree with, although it might seem counterintuitive, is the lack of importance of equipment, although it's something I've yapped on about a lot, because I've been kind of focused on equipment for a bit, and I do help some pros with equipment, and also a lot of beginners to intermediates. My main takeaway has been, like, get the equipment out of your head so you can focus on your tennis. But what people seem to want is to get the equipment more and more into their head, and that seems to be a trend that I've noticed. So, like, what's your take on this? And I know a part of it, but it's interesting to discuss. Like, how important is really the racket to you in a way?
Not very, to be totally honest. So yeah, it's a big topic, and I would say, first of all, you've done such a great job and it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse, right? You've published a lot of great content about gear that's been helpful and insightful. And so that's part of what kind of bounces, like, the message that bounces back that you hear from your audience is going to be, you know, it's going to be part of it. When I work with students, like, I have very little in terms of conversation with players about gear, because I don't really ever talk about it, hardly ever. And so it doesn't really come back to me. So that's part of it. And let me just, like, clear the air here. of course, it's important. Like it's important that you have a racket and string setup that's logical and like makes sense based on your level of play, your swing speed, your style of play. Like, of course, that's important. But what I don't really get into personally, it just doesn't personally interest me, is like micro, like fine tuning, like which brand is better. Like, I don't think brand matters at all. As long as it's a major manufacturer that has decent quality control and like they've been in the game for a while and they've established themselves as being able to produce a quality product. And as long as you're selecting the head size, the overall weight, and like the balance of racket that makes sense for you and your play style, then you're good. And could you improve your game a couple percentage points up or down if you go in the wrong direction? Yeah, absolutely, definitely. But I guess I'm more, I don't know. It's in the title of my website. Like I try to focus on what I think is most important, and I have beaten other players with a frying pan and won bets playing with frying pan. And so, can I play my best tennis with a frying pan? Absolutely not. Like, it's not even close. But can I play pretty like decent tennis with a frying pan? Yeah, I can. And so somewhere between frying pan and your absolute optimal, optimized like setup of like balance and swing weights and racket, string tension and like string pattern and like whatever, all the rest of it, somewhere in between those two extremes, like a big chunk of that, like 50% of that spectrum probably, you're going to be like right in the ballpark of your performance capacity day in and day out. And I think changing fundamental habits, like let's just pick the split step. I've been frickin' railing on the split step for over a decade, and yet 97% of tennis players still don't use a split step. If you're gonna obsess over like 1 or 2 pounds in your string like tension, and you're experimenting with like what you put in your crosses and mains because you think it's gonna make you a much better tennis player, but you don't split step, what the hell are you like? You're wasting your time. By learning to split step, you could make like a 10 or 20% improvement in your quality of your play. Whereas, going up or down in tension by a couple pounds, maybe we're adding 1 or 2, percentage points. So that's my general thoughts. I hopefully this doesn't come off as me saying that it doesn't matter. It does matter. But I've always just been kind of obsessive about focusing on what I feel is the most fundamental thing, and just really like kind of focus on that. And so because of that, over the years, and the other thing is I know what I like, and my general response to people who ask me for advice is find out what you like. Like I know what I like, and there's going to be an optimal like size, weight, balance, swing weight that feels most comfortable to you, flexibility that you like the most. It's probably going to be totally different than what I like, and the only way you'll know what you like is by trying a bunch of stuff, narrowing it down, and then just stick with that once you know what you like. So yeah, it's just like anything else. Listen, I have students that endlessly tinker with their technique to their detriment. And they're so hyper fixated on trying to like change every little like bend and angle of, their wrist, and they're trying to like mimic their favorite player just because they think Alcaraz is cool. Like they want to hit their forehand like him. There's lots of ways that players can go in an unhealthy path with technique. And trying to master the game from a technical perspective can go in a really negative position, in a really negative direction. And so it's human nature. The same thing happens with gear, where people can get hyper fixated on it and go down a rabbit trail of just kind of wasting a lot of time. If you're just enjoying fixating on gear, fantastic. Go ahead and like have fun with it and have a good time. But if you think you're gonna make like some mega jump in your performance, because you're adding like a gram of lead tape, somewhere, it's probably not going to work out that way.
No, I 100% agree. I think it's people sometimes get too locked into things. I also have friends that get too crazy about technique. Like it's all they think about is how to hit a proper ATP forehand, and just tweaking stuff. But I obviously talk a lot to players who have tested like loads and loads of rackets. Where my point is like if you find something you like, stick to that. Like it's the same with shoes. You find a shoe that you like. If you can stock up on that shoe, that's a good idea. You don't have to buy then a new shoe, right? Because then that shoe is unavailable, and your foot is important. Like you might have back problems because you used the wrong shoe and stuff like that. Similar to rackets, like you find a racket string, I like it. Maybe you can stock up, like buy 4 rackets, it lasts you a while, and you're good. You don't have to look at racket reviews, And I generally think that's like common sense is usually the best when it comes to technique, when it comes to rackets, strings, whatever, So it's like that common sense. Don't waste too much time unless you love it, and it becomes your kind of passion thing, So I completely agree. I think Nicola was also pointing this out, when we talked, and I think a lot of players have the same opinion. Like, find what you like, don't go down the rabbit hole, and stick to that. Then try to work on fundamental stuff. And then now we get to kind of a point where I think some people put maybe the least amount of effort in, at least in my experience, is like the strategy and the tactics of like, how do you construct a point, no matter if you're only slicing or, moonballing a lot or whatever you're doing. And that's something obviously you work with a lot as well. And how do you feel like that, like the reception of like proper tennis tactics and strategy is among the tennis community today?
I think it's really good. It's really positive. I think people inherently understand the value of it. I think what the biggest misunderstanding is that there's blind spots and there's gaps between feel and real, just like there is with technique. I think it's intuitive for people to understand that, okay, like it might feel like I'm doing something with my racket or my body, but the video might show that I'm doing something a little different. But when it comes to, let's say, what patterns you tend to play, do you tend to hit more cross-court or down the line? Do you tend to hit flatter, more with more topspin? Do you tend to take more risk or less risk? I think people assume that, well, it's me making the decisions out there, so of course, like I'm totally like in tune with what it is that the decisions that I'm making. And in my experience coaching, that's not true at all. People have a certain image in their mind of the type of tennis that they play, but the video, in my experience, reveals just as much like friction between the feel and real perspectives as with technique. And so just yet another reason why everybody should record themselves today and find out what's actually happening out there. And again, same thing like with me. I'm in a privileged position that I, by default, record everything I do on a tennis court. And I've spent a lot of time over the years watching myself. I'm one of the more self-aware humans on the face of the earth, probably. And it's the same thing with me with tactics. I watch back all my matches and routinely see things where I'm like, what the, like that was the stupidest like decision ever. And I can generally kind of work my way back through it. Like, okay, I can see like in the moment what I was seeing here when I freeze time and like look at what was happening. So I understand why I made that mistake. But every time I make a mistake like that and I recognize it and I see it, is a huge opportunity for growth and improvement, because to the degree that I'm unaware of those gaps between the decisions I make and how much sense they make from like a textbook, standpoint, to the degree I'm unaware of those gaps, if I don't know what I don't know, and I'm just making poor decisions, and I don't even know what those poor decisions are, then improving is extremely, extremely difficult, because you're kind of painting yourself in a corner with poor fundamentals. And if you're assuming you're making good choices from a fundamental basis while you're actually not, that's where people really get stuck and they plateau. So I would highly, highly encourage everybody to record themselves. Like you said before, I know it's painful at first, but it's kind of like hearing yourself, for the first time, a recording of your voice, and it's like, that's not what I sound like, is it? Like it, because to ourselves, the tone is very different because of how our skull like resonates. But as you hear, there's no longer any dissonance for me, and maybe that's the same for you too. But when I hear myself on a recording, it's the same as what I hear in my own head now. I don't know how many years that's been the case. And it's the same thing when I watch myself play tennis now. There's no longer the dissonance because I've watched myself so many times. I've torn off all the Band-Aids. There's no Band-Aids left anymore. And now I can just like in a calm, objective, like non-emotional way, just take in the information like in a raw, like data kind of sense. And it's so powerful for me now. And I want nothing more for everybody watching than just be able to get to that place where there's no longer the fear, there's no longer the anxiety, there's no longer like the shame of like seeing yourself anymore, and it's just data and it's just information. But I recognize like that takes a long time and a big commitment to the process. But it's so much more rewarding and so much more enjoyable when you can get to that point.
I would think it's interesting that you pointed that out, because it's something I feel 100% myself. Like the voice, I don't even think about anymore. Like when I started doing stuff like this, or I mean, I worked in radio in the States before many years ago, 20 years ago. And when I started playing tennis, it was like, wow, is this what I'm looking at? But now it's just, I feel like I know how the shot looks. Even, when I look back at, like, I record almost everything, right? And then I edit, and I have to go through a lot of like even match footage, whatever, just to have like a shorter video. But I find enjoyment in that. I find enjoyment in actually seeing my own even mistakes. But also like then you have some maybe good shots. You're like, oh, that was a nice highlight. Like, good stuff. You need to train that muscle of self-hate muscle. You need to train it or break it down, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. It really is super analogous to the self like auditory. But what's interesting about it, and what I really like that analogy, because what's interesting about hearing yourself like on the well, kids these days don't know about this. Remember answering machines? Like that was the first thing that popped in my head. When you hear yourself on the answering machine, you're like, oh, like that's not what I sound like. But the reality is, every other human on planet Earth who's ever heard your voice, when they hear your voice come out of the answering machine, they're like, yeah, that's what you sound like. Like that's you. Like that's Jonas. Like that's what Jonas sounds like. And it's the same thing with tennis. When you watch yourself on video for the first time and you're like, like that's not me. Like that's not Ian. Like I feel so different than that. Like this must be a mistake. Like I'm a much better tennis player in my own head than that. But the funny thing is, every other human on the face of the planet that's ever watched you play tennis knows that the person you see on the video is actually your real tennis self. You are the only person that's being fooled by the filter. You're the only person that's being tricked. And so, in my experience, when I point that out to people, they're like, oh, yeah, I guess, like wouldn't you actually like to know who you really are? Wouldn't that maybe be valuable? That you get past the embarrassment and you actually find out like who you actually are as a tennis player, because that's the biggest obstacle in your way for improvement. It's just not even knowing what the hell you even do like on the court. So the sooner people can get over that like fear and the embarrassment, the faster they're going to improve, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think like the thing is, you don't have to put yourself out there in terms of posting stuff on YouTube channels or social media. You can just watch it at your own leisure at home, right? Like you say, people who play against you or watch you when you play, they already know how you play. So this is just for you, right? You don't need to publish anything anywhere. But then there are people, now it's more and more common, like people put their own tennis out on YouTube. They can get some trolls. It can be a nasty experience, and so it's not for everyone, right? But you've started this Real Tennis channel, which is match play between players of generally different levels, but I would say it's pretty like 4.5, 4.0, 5.0, like that kind of level. And yep. I find it really refreshing because it's it shows every point. There's no like fancy highlights only. What's the reception been to that? Like, and how have you experienced like being on that channel yourself when you actually show your own match play?
I'll start with the second question first. I mentioned earlier that I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I like I love competition, and I love being in the face of like failure like that. I just kind of get off on that. And so that's part of the reason why I started the channel. And being in one of those matches generally we're streaming it live to our channel members on Real Tennis. We're recording it with, I don't know how many, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, it was 4 or 5 cameras. There's 2 peers, there's 2 like other coaches that are watching and doing live commentary, like in a commentary booth. And and tennis is my job. Like tennis is my profession. So I might do something any given point that would be no, I'm way past this now, but like on paper, I might lose to somebody that is like so. This is what like your ego says, right? I might take an L that's like so embarrassing that my career is over, and people watch it and are like, why am I listening to this guy? Like he just freaking sucks. And so I love being in that position. Maybe I'm a little bit sick, but it feels to me like I played 3 years of college tennis, and that was the closest like I've come to that feeling where it's like all your teammates and peers are watching. The result matters for like the result of the team. Like the pressure of like the whole rest of the team is like on your shoulders, and it's like this is like the pinnacle of the competitive career for just about everybody who's there. Parents are there, you know, watching. Other team is watching. Coaches are watching, and so the real tennis matches are the closest thing I've felt to that kind of like experience of competition. And player after player that comes on the channel for the first time, when I interview them afterwards and I ask them how it was, they say the same thing. Like a lot of the players on the channel have accomplished really amazing things in terms of like national rankings or playing, you know, in a fancy like D1 college. And they're like, this is like the most pressure I've ever felt coming on the real tennis court. So I love being a part of that experience, and I love providing that experience for other adrenaline, you know, junkies, and watching them and seeing how they deal with it and seeing how they manage the pressure and the expectations. So that's what it's like to play on the channel. And I think the response, honestly, I was hoping that it would be a much more mainstream reception, but just like everything else that I do, it looks like it's more of a niche thing, and I was hoping it would kind of, you know, just like everybody who makes content, of course, I was hoping it would kind of blow up and like become a big thing, because the people who do enjoy it, who do watch it, a comment that I see over and over and over again is this is way better than watching professional tennis, because of the way that we engineer it and we get real-time feedback from players, and we edit it together so that it's like a story arc, and we kind of dramatize it, you know, a little bit with the editing and the music and stuff like that, and like the matchups and like rematches and stuff like that, and the commentary. And so we try hard to make it as entertaining and dramatic as possible while still staying true to like what really happened in the match. And I was hoping that would become like a big kind of phenomenon. And I'm still like, just to be clear, like I'm really proud of what we create, and what we do is really special. But so for people who appreciate that kind of storytelling, the feedback is extremely strong, super positive, and people really love it and appreciate it. But between you and me and whoever else listens, I was definitely hoping that it was going to kind of become a bigger thing, but it looks like it's going to be more of a niche audience.
That sounds like my life, pretty much. It's like it's just always you do
it's every
something. Okay, maybe
content
this could have some wings.
Yep.
It's a classic, I think. But it's funny because it's also a thing I could see have really strong legs to move and create like a, you know, emotion around the tennis world, because I really like the production format. I like that it feels like a vulnerable situation where people, you know, have to be very honest when they have to speak in between, you know, and that's really how tennis should be framed, I think. Also pro tennis sometimes lose out because the drama is not there, and the storytelling even from the commentators is not quite there. Like it just feels a little bit stale, and something we could improve. And then you have channels like Winston Do, for example, that he also does like match play, and that's doing really well. So I don't like, for me, YouTube is a mystery. Like I if someone wants YouTube consulting, they should go to anyone but me, because I don't understand anything about this stuff.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I've listened to your other interviews with creators, and I feel like I've been around this game for a really long time. I've invested a lot in my own education, and I don't think it's as mysterious as people make it out to be. I think what makes it feel mysterious is we have like all humans have like a hardcore like filter between our brain and what is actually happening in real life, and that filter is our own preferences, our ego, and not wanting to embarrass ourselves, the way we think that things should be done. All of that really kind of paints like what we see in everyday life, you know, not just in tennis or making YouTube videos. The reality of the algorithm is it's going to reward the best video. And the best video is purely subjective based on the audience. And so when we upload a video that does poorly, humans didn't enjoy it. And when we upload a video that kills it, humans really, really loved it. And that's it. And that's the whole game. And so if you try to back your way into it from like an analytical perspective, like, oh, I need to have this many camera angles and I need to like cut, you know, the angle this many times and I need to have like animations and like titles on the screen. And you go at it from a tactical perspective, which is what I think almost all of us do that are creators, then you're just always going to be chasing your tail. Because you'll upload one video that crushes it and you're like, oh man, I put the little like graphic in the corner like this time. Like, oh, that really made it do better. And it's not true at all. What it really comes down to is the core idea, is like the theme and like the bones of the concept itself. Is it intriguing in and of itself to humans? And if the answer is no, you don't have a shot ever. It doesn't even matter how good the rest of it is. It doesn't matter how good the camera quality is. It doesn't matter how good the audio quality is. If the core structure of the idea of like every video that you upload is like it's a story. It's got a beginning, a middle, and the end, and an end. And if the concept on paper out of the gate isn't very intriguing, then it never even has a chance. So the concept has to be attractive to humans, and then B, in the first 10 seconds, if you don't pay off that good concept and make people believe that you're going to actually reveal whatever it is that you promised to reveal, or you double down on the intrigue and you make them believe that I'm in for like a journey here, and I'm what I just signed up for is like a ride that's going to be enjoyable and maybe emotional, maybe revelatory, and I'm going to learn something like kind of secret that like nobody knows. There has to be some emotional, like human hook that gets set in the first couple seconds of the video that pays off the big concept that you promised in the thumbnail and the title. And so if you do the thumbnail and the title and you kill it, but you don't pay it off in the first like 10, 15 seconds and reassure people, yes, you're actually going to receive what it is that you were hoping in the first couple seconds, now you've lost again and nobody's going to watch it. It basically comes down to clicks and then retention. Clicks and retention. You won't get the clicks unless the big picture theme is hot. And if the big picture theme is hot, but the retention is garbage because you didn't pay it off and you're not leaving breadcrumbs and you're not kind of stringing them along in a respectful way where they feel like, wow, I'm enjoying this, journey. That's the retention part of it. If the retention's poor, then it doesn't matter if you get clicks, YouTube won't promote it. So it's really very simple. It is like super basic. You either get the clicks and the retention, or you don't get views. If you get one or the other, like you've uploaded videos, I'm sure, that have an average watch time that like crushes, and maybe it's like 10 minutes or 20 minutes or something. But the big idea isn't sexy enough or intriguing enough to get the clicks. You need the clicks and the retention. And once you start figuring out how to get both pieces, then you can scale to the moon. And that's basically it. And I know what gets clicks and retention, and I've made so many freaking videos over the years that that there's certain like topics that I just don't want to talk about anymore. And it's the sexy topics, because I've already made so many of those videos on how to hit a forehand with 10 more miles per hour, or how to hit a kick serve, I've made so many freaking videos like on those topics that I'm burned out on it, and I've shifted over the years to just making what I really personally find rewarding and I actually want to talk about. Because if I try to reverse engineer the algorithm and like the human response every single time to make a hot tennis tutorial, then I'll eventually just go insane and quit, and I'll get burned out. And I've been on that doorstep many times in the past. And so, kind of rambling right now, but did I answer the question of like how to get views? Does that make sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense. And coming from a marketing background, like I worked many years for like like CMO for like online companies, and all you talk about like is kind of retention, conversion, like new signups, blah blah blah. The whole curve. And for me, it was more like this whole thing was more of a passion project where I did not want to do it like that. Like it's almost on purpose. Like you, exactly like you. I
I
wanted to
respect that.
do. No, I wanted to do stuff that I find interesting because I think sometimes, I mean, the way you let it out there, which I think is 100% correct, is that it's like how Mr. Beast does it, and he does it to perfection. He knows, like, okay, I capture the guy. This is what we need to do for retention. He studies every video, has a whole team, does everything perfectly,
Yep.
and he's built this machine, right? But then there's also like a part of YouTube. I watch quite a lot of YouTube compared to other stuff. I don't watch it hardly any Netflix and stuff like that. Is that sometimes you just want to feel like at home with a creator or without like a theme or just something that in that type of video that makes you feel like a certain way that you like, or even if the pace is slow, or even if there's no like, this promise will be revealed in minute 5 of the video. It's like ultra fast paced and
Yep.
stuff like that. So
Yep.
that's the way I've approached it. But yes, obviously, if you want to have a big reach on YouTube, you need to think of it like you're working for like HBO. You need to go a little bit like that. Like, how do I make this super sexy for the most people? Because tennis
That's right.
is niche already. I mean, tennis is a big sport, but watching tennis on YouTube is still a niche, I would say. Like, it's a hard, like, if you talk to other creators, if you review Apple products, for example, there you have a possibility, if you make really good reviews, to create quite a strong following. But even tennis coaching, which is a pretty popular topic, it has a smaller niche, I would say, than many other things on YouTube. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and that's the in a nutshell. That's the conclusion I've come to, honestly, many times over the years. The hardest part for me over the years in doing this and having some longevity is balancing my competitive nature and badly wanting to grow like the business with the with my like authentic like creator self, like the like I guess there's like the competitive like business side of me, and then there's like the arts like side of me that like just wants to have authenticity and integrity and like just make like the things that I feel strongly about. And the tug of war between those there really is at odds. Like it's kind of opposite like sides of the spectrum. And that's been a struggle for me. And every time I get kind of depressed and frustrated by our lack of growth in terms of like the company, I have to go back to remind myself again, you have chosen a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche. Like there's tennis, which I just watched a video the other day that said tennis, I don't know if this is accurate or not, has 1.3 billion fans. So that's like the top of the funnel, like people who just like tennis. And then the sub niche is people who play tennis, is much smaller than people who just like tennis. Then you have people who play tennis who would like to get better. That's a much smaller number than just the people who play tennis. Then below people who want to get better at tennis and play tennis are people that are actually willing to be uncomfortable and are actually willing to have band-aids like get pulled off and get exposed a little bit for the sake of improvement. And so that's where I'm operating. I'm operating like 4 levels down from tennis, which is already a small subset of like humans. Mr. Beast is operating on the humans, like level. And so that's why in addition to like his like unbelievable work ethic and his understanding of human psychology and his understanding of like storytelling and engagement, that's why he's able, all those things and many more is why he's able to get 100 million views on a video, and why when I create something that I really really care about, I get like 1,000. It's a combination of being willing, like, am I willing to sacrifice the art for the views? Okay, if the answer is no, and I've chosen a 5-layer down like niche, and I'm gonna stay true to like the art side of it, that it is what it is. Like I've chosen my destiny, and there's some days that I wake up in the morning and the business side of it is, really stressful, and I wish I could just kind of let go of the art and just be a business person. There's been times in the past where the business has been doing really well, but I don't feel like I'm quite being true like to the art side of it. That's been a minority. It's usually the other way around. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and I resonate 100%. Like, I mean, if you work in money industries, which is what I did before, doing this now, I've done this full time since last year, right? So, and doing this in some way full time, and then the thing is, like, I'm a very, like, I like artsy stuff. Like, I like, playing music and creating stuff, and I wrote like 2 novels before, and I just love the arts of some, like, creating stuff. But that's a hard thing to marry with business. Like, arts and business, it's a tough thing to marry. Like, I would, if in the future, if I could afford it, I would like want to get like a business manager or someone who just thinks about that, because I don't want to deal with it technically, right?
Yep.
Even though I have an understanding of it from working so long for companies that do that. It's still something I don't really feel comfortable doing 100%. So I 100% agree with you. And being both the creator and the business person or the CEO is a very tough. I think that's an extremely tough balance to play, right? That's something that I think all of us that I've talked to now, like the content creators, like many of us do it ourselves, pretty much everything. But you have the editing, at least you put that out, right? What's your team structure like?
Yeah, I pushed for probably a 5-year period to really try to scale and grow and make it as big of like a real business as possible. And I'm past that point now, and I'm kind of on my way down on the other side of the hill of making that push at this point. At our peak, we had, I think, 7 full-time team members, a combination of coaches and editors and business and like marketing consultants and stuff like that. And right now it's me and 2 full-time editors and a customer service / coach, a customer service manager who just like every day he manages our inbox. So like things that I'm not willing to do anymore. I actually really enjoy editing. Like, I like editing, but it's just, I'm not a great editor. Like, the guys who edit my stuff are way better editors than me. They can do it better than me, faster than me anyway. B, it's not like the unique value that I bring to the organization. The unique value I bring to the organization is making students happy, giving them incredible experiences so that they continue to support the business, and coming up with content, whether it's paid content or free content, that's as engaging and widespread as possible so that it again supports, the business. If I'm not spending my time on those things, then I'm probably not maximizing like our results. So I outsourced editing starting like 8 or 9 years ago, and I'm still involved very much in the creative process. Certain videos I do notes on. We have like a team chat, the editors, and so on more creative videos, we'll put in the first cut, and then all of us will like give notes. The editor goes back, cuts it again, gives us a second draft. We'll give notes again. So I'm still part of like the creative process, but it doesn't make sense for me to push those buttons and like click the mouse like for those things, because it's not my strength. And I would say that's the number one like pitfall that creators fall into when they get stuck in terms of making it like a real business, is they don't let go. They're not comfortable letting other people do things that they would rather control. And as long as you have to be touching everything, it can't ever get bigger than the number of hours that you put into it. The only way to grow like a real like sustainable business is to let go of things and let other people do it for you. And finding the right people is maybe the hardest part. There's just a lot of trial and error in that process, and a lot of like giving people test projects and saying, sorry, it's not going to work. until you find the right people. And it's a pain in the ass up front, but then when you do find the right person, it unbelievably just frees your time and your brain and your creativity, and it's the only way to make stuff like what we do bigger and better. So as long as I can, it would really be a shame for me to have to go back to editing my own stuff, because that would just simply mean that I just can't, like, the bottleneck would be tiny at that point if I had to edit my own stuff. The only way I'm able to do multiple channels and multiple styles of content to provide like entertainment and value to multiple types of people is because I let other people touch my stuff. And if I didn't let anybody touch my stuff, I'd be serving a much smaller audience with a much more narrow type of content. And for some people that's enough, and that's fantastic. But if you want to grow your reach and help more people, then it's critical to let other people into the process.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think it's letting go is tough. Like I'm also a kind of control-ish person, and having an editor would be a relief. But then you feel like, oh, but maybe that's not where I should put the effort. Like, because the editing I kind of like, although I'm not good either. And I see like there are channels that are like Felix, for example, for Tennis Brothers. He does a very good job editing himself, it seems like. But it's also going to be a time issue at some point. It's technically seems to be that case always, because editing something that to be really good is a real craft. For people who haven't edited videos, it's I can tell you that's not that easy. It looks easy with the timeline just doing that, but if you want to be really good at it, it's quite tough. Yeah. So talking about videos and editing and all that stuff, do you have other like social media channels that you put effort into, or you're focused on YouTube as the main kind of vehicle of Essential Tennis?
Yeah, YouTube's always been the primary hub of like our content, and then we just repurpose from there. So like our second biggest is our Facebook page, but things just get repurposed for Facebook, like from YouTube. Most of our long form content just, we just upload the same file over to Facebook. And then Instagram is number 3. Obviously things have to be formatted significantly different for Instagram. So I like that YouTube started doing the short form content, because it just makes it that much easier for us to mirror, similar content between different platforms. But yeah, it's in that order for us right now. YouTube has always been number 1, and then Facebook, and then Instagram after that.
Yeah, makes sense. TikTok, interested or uninterested?
We made an account like years and years ago, and we uploaded a couple of things. But remember when I described our core like student? Like, we're talking about somebody who's 55, yeah. Like professional, like kids are older. They're not on TikTok. So I know we could get a lot of views if we focused on that, but it wouldn't serve our core demographic. Our core demographic it's in that order. It's YouTube, Facebook, and then Instagram. And so, yeah, as TikTok matures and the audience matures, maybe we'd put more time into it, but right now we're not.
Talking about maturing, you have a pretty large family. How many kids do you have? Is it 4 or 5? You have quite a few, right?
Oh no, you must have heard me talking about my brother. My brother James, his wife is expecting their 5th later this year. I have 2 kids. I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Yeah, that might have been it. But still, like, do you have any visions or plans or ideas to get them to play tennis, or they have other hobbies?
0. They have other hobbies, yeah. Before I had children, I made a promise to myself that I was not going to be a tennis parent. Not that I would like keep them from playing tennis if they wanted to, but having spent my entire life around a game and watching the behavior of parents and watching parent after parent destroy their relationship with their child, like in very sad, like catastrophic, like emotionally catastrophic ways. I mean, really, truly, images come to mind that just make me so sad. And so before I even had children, like I would be next to those courts, like teaching lessons and like feeling like so much pity for these kids. And I just made a promise to myself a long time ago that when I had kids, I was not gonna hurt them like that. And so I've been very, very, very like hands off with my kids in the sense that uh, we allow them to have whatever interest, like whatever's piquing their interest at the moment. Like we totally allow them the space and the time, and if necessary, the money to go pursue that. And I think it's really important to let kids like explore and be their own human, and not get in the way of that process. So they've both in like 1 hour pockets like shown interest in tennis. Like they both have tennis rackets, and we have tennis balls around the house. And I would say probably 6 times a year, my kids say, "Hey, let's play tennis," and we go into the street and we hit the ball back and forth for like 15 minutes, and then they're good for a couple months again. And so that's my kids' involvement with tennis.
I think that's a very healthy take because it's also something that I've seen so much around, like traveling around the tennis scene, tennis world in different countries, is that like, you see these very toxic parents. I'm not saying all parents are toxic because obviously there are
No.
success
Yeah.
stories and there are very, healthy relationships. But it's almost like a famous cliche, almost like the tennis parent who's kind of like forcing their daughter or son to
Yep.
stay in tennis. And I think it's a difficult relationship. What do you think of these pros that still have their parents as coaches? Like, Stefanos, I've, hung out a bit with, and then we have other ones. And it seems so for me in most cases. What's your take?
My opinion is it's just not worth it. Let's just acknowledge the fact that it's like a one. Jeez, I mean, yeah, I have really strong feelings on this. Let's just
That's
say
fine.
let's just say that you have lots of money and lots of time, and your child is really talented. Those three are unthinkable luxuries for like the vast majority of like humanity. So like all already like, but let's just say hypothetically, you have lots of money, lots of time, and a really gifted child. Even if you have those three things, which are necessary to like make it in the game of tennis, it's still one to multiple millions like odds that your child is going to have the drive, the like dedication to like the craft. Even if you even if like hypothetically you are overbearing and force them like an Agassi, kind of story, and you essentially make them do it, the odds of them actually being good enough and actually trying hard enough to be successful at a level where it actually is ROI positive, like it actually pays like back more than what you invested, is astronomically just terrible odds. And so what are you giving up? So let's just say you check all those boxes and you beat the odds. And it's like 1 in like 5 million kids that have the time, the money, and the talent. Actually, like you're one of the 100 or 200 people on the face of the planet that like actually like makes a living. What are you potentially, like you said, there's some great like sports parents out there, but potentially, like let's just take a risk analysis, like a cost risk, analysis here. Potentially, you're sacrificing your child's emotional health and well-being. Potentially, you're sacrificing your relationship with your child, and you're making it transactionally based. You are like you're like pouring the like water of like motivation on the top of the funnel, and trickling out in the bottom is effort. And if you like make that your relationship with your child, you'll never have a good relationship with your child like for the rest of their life. And you may completely destroy the relationship with the game and with the sport, where they come to resent it and they hate it, and it becomes something that they just like have to do because of all the pressure you've put on them in a familiar way, like in a family sense, in a monetary sense, in a time sense. Your 10-year-old's not stupid. Like they see the time invested, they see the money invested, they see all the driving and the trips, and the last thing they want to do is let down their parents. They're not emotionally mature enough to understand that they could say no, hypothetically, if they wanted to. You're giving up so much for a tiny possibility that they're gonna make it, and it's just crazy to me that parents go hard and choose the path of like giving it a shot. And they just don't know. Like they just don't understand. They think their child is special. They think their child is like the one. And their judgment is just clouded. They don't have the understanding or the perspective of like being able to see the whole game. They don't know what they're really asking. So I'm not blaming them. Like every parent wants what's best for their child. I'm not trying to say it's these are like evil people by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a lot of really just a lot of really tragic situations out there. My personal opinion is it's not worth the risk to try it. So like if you want to argue the other side of the coin, you would say, well, your daughter might be world class at like XYZ. You'll never know because you didn't push her to find out if she could be like that good. And what I'm saying is it's not worth the counterbalance. It's not worth the flip side for me. It's not worth the downside risk. I would much rather preserve my relationship with my child, have them feel loved and nurtured and supported, and give them the freedom to explore themselves, because the odds of them being world class in anything are just unbelievably low. So I'm not willing to take the risk, even if it means sacrificing potentially their like ultimate potential, in something, whatever that means in air quotes.
That's a very good point. And I think I've seen that a lot. And I think people underestimate how expensive, time-consuming, soul-consuming sometimes. I mean, like to be a professional tennis player. It's not like if you play like a team sport. Like you have a whole team. Your father is most likely not the coach of that team, and you have like a bunch of friends and you play it together. Tennis, you're alone, right? So you're alone on the court. You leave the court as a loser. You have a parent waiting for you there who is disappointed. There's no other way to hide the disappointment. Nobody can do it that well. It can be a pretty toxic situation, right? So I completely agree with your point of view, and I think it's pretty refreshingly honest to be as blunt in saying like, hey, it's most likely not even worth trying, right? That I think that is it's a very good point, and also like in any respect, like having a parent-kid relationship, even and like if you're working together in the same company, can be tricky from what I've seen, and that's not even tennis related, right? It's like parent-kid should be parent-kid relationship, in my opinion. I think if you can keep it like that. And one thing that's really connected to tennis is like, and really to this issue as well, is like the mental side. It's such a mental game. Is it something you think about a lot? Is it something you work on with players or you work on yourself? Because I think it's been like mental health is in the spotlight now in the last 5 years more than ever before, for many good reasons. But also with tennis, it's such a big part of your success on the court. Is that something you work with in any way?
Yeah, historically, it might be the thing I've spent the most time thinking about, honestly, personally. I just posted my most recent podcast, I think number 389. I think it's called Mental Tennis Transformation. Kind of chronicles my journey a little bit from, I mentioned before, I played 3 years of college tennis, and I actually ended up walking off my college team my senior year because I had become really miserable mentally and emotionally on a tennis court. Tennis had gone from being the thing I was most passionate about to the thing that brought me the most pain and frustration in life. And I felt like I had to like walk away from competing and just get ready for my coaching career. I was about to graduate. I was about to get married. And I was just so like day after day, just so miserable on the court. That I felt like I had to set down, the racket as a player. And so the last 20 years, I've really dedicated a lot of thought and time and energy and like reflection and education. I've created tons and tons of resources. Over the years, I've learned a tremendous amount, and I'm now in a place where I have all that big stack of like pressures that I talked about before, being on the real tennis court. I'm in a position now where I can with a smiling face like walk out to that court with that big stack of pressures, enjoy like every minute of it. Still totally get frustrated because I'm human and like I have wants and needs and like expectations, and so I'm still gonna make mistakes. I'm still gonna get frustrated, But the difference now is I'm able to let that frustration come out and refocus my energy and my mind on something positive and productive immediately, or as immediately as possible, depending on what just happened, and still perform to the best of my ability, which is never my best, but the best I can do, that day. And I'm in a position now where I can be content, totally like content with that, and even taking an L, walk off and find positives and find things I'm grateful for. And I had no capacity to do that before. So I've done a lot of work. I mean, I've done, I've never quantified it before, but I've done like 8 or 9 years of therapy, at this point. I've made a lot of resources and like courses on the mental game. I've done a lot of my own like work. And it's one of my favorite things to work on with students, because I see the benefit that it has ranging or stretching like way off the court into the rest of life as well. If you can come face to face with adversity and disappointment and embarrassment and failure, and be able to bounce off of it and redirect and refocus to something positive, like in day-to-day life, like that's a massively important, valuable tool. And so it's one of my favorite things to focus on with students, like in between the technical stuff. So yeah, it's really important topic for me.
Yeah, and I think also this is the one maybe you can see the biggest results. Like you talk also about like the aside from tennis, like in your personal life, but also like in a pure tennis sense. Like if you learn to master like how to forget what happened in the previous point or reset, which Novak talks a lot about in some recent content, you feel like, I mean, you will feel better. Like I did like 1 year of like mental tennis work, like not every day, but generally trying to improve, because I was pretty bad on the tennis court before, and I think there's a lot of crazy people on the tennis court. Like tennis makes you into a psychopath, right? It's like
100%, 100. I totally agree.
It's what happens. You can meet like a completely normal person. This happened to me in this ITF. I played the ITF Seniors Tour here in Spain, and like some players are really good. Like they play futures, they played something, and then now they're like 40, so they're playing on that tour. And they go there and you have a chat, you're more advanced in life, whatever you feel. And then one game in, and there's like a huge argument about a line call, which is completely pointless. Yeah. And suddenly the person you thought like, yeah, it seems like a nice guy, he's like, I'm going to punch this guy in the face. It's like, this is what tennis does to you, I think. So it's so good to try to master what you can control, right? And when you see someone go off the rails, on the other side of the net, it's a positive for you, because you're not going off the rails, and you can use that to win the match, probably, right? Tennis is one of those, I call it UFC with rackets. People don't, like, it's so competitive as a sport that it's almost physically, like, when you play other sports, I never feel like the same kind of competitive viciousness that I feel when I play a non-prize money tennis match. Do you agree with that? Like, the competitive aspect of tennis is a huge strength, but it can also lead to some less fortunate behavior.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it really psychologically stems back to what you pointed out earlier about the challenge of a child playing a solo sport, where you're like literally like on a stage, like you're on a like a flat like platform that's like roped off. Like you said, it's like, that's a great analogy. It's like UFC. Like you're in a cage with a stage in the middle of it. Everybody is like standing around and like looking down on your performance, and it's impossible without significant like personal awareness and effort and work and like reflection to put yourself in that space and not go kind of crazy. I 100%. I used to be right up there, like with the worst of them. My outbursts were internally like focused. Like it was like self anger and like hatred and like shame. Like that was my, like I didn't externalize it. It was internal, but it was really really bad. So I completely understand like the how triggering it can be. And yeah, it's definitely because of the format, because of the unique way that it puts people under a microscope, and you're under a microscope. And I think I don't know that it's like a natural human thing to be able to deal with that. Like we're wired to be like communal creatures, you know, to like be in like a society together that's like nurturing and like uplifting and like supportive. And when you walk onto the tennis court, all of that disappears, and you're just alone and you're exposed. And so the worst, yeah, the worst, it brings out the worst of people, and sometimes the best in people, and that's what makes it such a great game, and a big reason why I love it so much.
Like I used to be the same. I used to be like horrible negative self-talk, which they say generally is more damaging than if someone outside stood and screamed that at you from afar, you know. So it's like pretty bad to be conducting self-talk. And now you see that all the time where people are really like they're so upset with just watching. I was in Kyrgios next to his box at Stuttgart, and he was repeating 100 million times how much he hated tennis, how much he sucked at tennis. It was just like all you heard, because you were quite close. It was like, this cannot be good. this
Yeah,
can be something else, right? And he still won the match, but yeah, he probably didn't feel good doing so. So that shows tennis, like how it is, and how easy it is to blame like external factors as well for what's going on inside your head. You know, suddenly the court is bad, the racket is wrong, your opponent is annoying for whatever reason. He wasn't annoying when you were winning 6-3, but now he's really annoying in the second set. And it's like you know, it's like someone is studying you in a lab, right? There's some alien outside. It's like, let's put these two people on this kind of gladiator arena, and we see if they, you know, lose their shit. Talking to you, I like you're a wise guy. I can really tell that straight away, and also the way you do your videos, you think about things more deeply than just like the nature of just improving in tennis and stuff. And I think that's really nice. And I think that's a lot of like you can always take things out of videos that are not just tennis related, which is great. And now I'm going to change tack completely. Have you watched Breakpoint?
No, so I'm a terrible example for tennis fans. Earlier I was talking about how like I've kind of optimized my life for business and for family, and like my personal tennis like comes after that, and tennis other than my own tennis is like way down the list like after that. And so
Yeah.
I very rarely watch tennis. I don't keep up with the tour at all. I do a little bit. Like I subscribe to some content creators that I really love that do tour news. Shout out to Matt at Coffee Break Tennis is by far I wish he would upload more, but in my opinion, he's by far the best tour news resource. Incredibly entertaining and also very like insightful. So like I keep up with like the big stuff that's going on, but I don't really watch TV. I'm pretty boring, you know, apart from like family and business life. We haven't had Netflix for a while, so I haven't. If I had Netflix, I probably would have watched it by now, but we just don't have it, and I just don't go to the trouble of like stealing somebody else's logins. So I haven't watched it yet, but it sounds like it was really really well done, and I'm sure someday I'll take the time to watch it.
Yeah, it's the second season. I would say if you get that time, I'm the same with TV. I don't have really time, or I don't take my time to do that. But the second season was much better than the first one. Like that relates more to their previous productions. They did one on golf, which was very good, and the one on the Formula One, which was the start of it. And the second one, you get closer to everything, and it feels more organic. The first one was more like, do you know the rules of tennis? Which for us tennis fans, nerds, whatever you want to call us, is not so exciting, right? And that's the thing. So do you have any other hobbies, or there's simply no time? Something else you're doing besides tennis and family?
I've got a lot of hobbies in the hobby graveyard that I'd love to come back to someday. The only things I do for myself right now are occasionally I'll play tennis. I'd say I average probably once a week being on the courts, and I have to stretch. I'm old enough now. I think you're a year younger than me, so I know you know what I'm talking about. I'm old enough now that if I don't
Yeah.
do something very routinely to take care of my body, then I just don't enjoy. I just can't enjoy it the way I used to because I'll just be limited. So I try to do yoga. I try to do it every morning, but I probably average like 4 or 5 times a week in the morning. And I've recently, in the last year, I've picked up road cycling as a way to cross train. and I've been very surprised at how much I've really started enjoying road cycling a lot, which has really surprised me. So that's how I kind of keep my body in condition. So those are like my hobbies right now. Things that like support the other ways that I want to spend my time. I don't do anything on the side that's like extra, that I do it just because I enjoy it, and it's maybe not healthy. But it just kind of feels like the phase of life that I'm in right now. But in the past, I was into golf for a while. I love golf. I was into car racing for a while. I love cars. I don't have time for those things anymore. I was into photography and like filmmaking, still photography and filmmaking for a while. Again, like I just don't have time for that. So in the past, those have been like side like passions of mine, and in the future, I'll probably do those things again.
Yeah, and I think with age as well, like, you know, with a family, you have to prioritize time. And I also, you realize that even if you have the time, prioritizing it towards things that generate some, you know, result of some kind, whether it's physical, mental, or something.
Exactly.
Like for me, playing video games is unthinkable. Like it's not something I was never really that interested, but I have friends that are, you know, and I'm like, for me, that would be such a waste of my time that I would just feel stupid doing it, you know. But then you're doing the yoga, which is great. And I like you were similar age. If I don't do some kind of warm up, I play tennis, let's say 5 times a week at least. If I don't do some kind of warm up, I'm gonna suffer in some way, or just risk some stupid injury, or just a little bit of pain. So every day I have to do something, you know. And it's funny with cycling. I guess that's also like entertaining in a way, although it's, you know, it's strenuous, and but it also gives you time to be out and think, because it's when you play tennis, you can't think. You have to focus on tennis. You can't think about anything else. You're not gonna hit the ball, right? So
No.
I see more of an interest in these types of activities that you can combine also with, like, you know, taking walks, road cycling. That's a growing sport for sure, especially in Europe. I see it everywhere, especially in Spain for sure.
Yeah, I love it because it is reflective, but it's like very internal. The way I do it is the way I do most things. I put on a heart rate monitor. I've got my I've got my phone right there, like facing me, so I can track like my route and where I'm going, and track my speed and my heart rate in real time, and then I just like go as hard as I can, and until I'm done. And so I don't do long rides. Like I'm not out doing 2 hour, 3 hour rides. My cap is like an hour, and I'm trying to like maximize my heart rate for the entire like 60 minutes. And then I get home and I'm done, and I like push myself hard, and it's great for my body. It definitely helps me clear my mind. But I'm mostly like focused on like my physiology while I'm doing it. It's zero impact like on the body, so I feel like I'm able to maintain my fitness without like wearing on my joints, which is such a premium. You know, if I can figure out that combination, swimming's really the only, or I guess rowing as well. Swimming and rowing and cycling are really the only things that you can kind of mimic the intensity and like the full body like requirements of tennis, but without just, you know, taking like clicks off the odometer every single time that you pound on the ground. Those are all the reasons why I love cycling, and I'm enjoying it more and more.
Yeah, you see some tennis players go to like triathlon. Like I have several friends, like Magnus Norman. I don't know that well, but he's a famous example, like the coach of Stan. But also other friends who used to play like pro, and then they go to triathlon, right? Because they need that massive endorphin rush of extreme, you know, endurance and physical exertion. And I think that kind of shines the light on how physical tennis is, because people don't realize, if you don't play tennis, if you don't like watch tennis really up close live, for example, you don't know how much, you know, you put
No.
in your body, how much you have to really be strong and fast, and also have the reaction speed of a tiger to just play tennis on a decent level, I would say. So is that something you see with your students, for example, if you have somewhat older students, are they also like in tune with that their body needs to stay in tune?
No, to be honest, I feel like and this is just human nature. I think most people that I work with only really pay attention closely when they have to, and that's how we all operate, right? For the most part, like once something really starts hurting to the point where it gets in the way of what you want to do, that's when it's like, okay, I gotta like pay attention to this. But I think your average tennis player, which is it's like the sweet spot of like the people that I'm working with, your average tennis player doesn't do much off the court, and instead they view tennis as like that's their exercise. And I think you can get away with that pretty well until about our age. Like at least in my experience and what I've seen like around me, until you hit your 40s, you can get away with that. But if you're going to go into your 50s, 60s and play 3, 4 times a week and not do something supplementary off the court, it's just not going to go. Like, you're not going to last very long, because tennis does take a lot out of the body. It's not additive. Like in a certain sense, it is. Like, it's better than sitting on the couch and watching Netflix and eating Doritos. So it's like better than doing nothing, but it will take out of your system. It will provide, impact, and it will provide stress and strain and repetitive. I mean, you think about like a tennis ball colliding with your racket that's connected to your body again and again and again. Unless you're incredibly efficient and fluid and smooth, something has to give eventually. And same thing with your knees, same thing with your hips. So I'm trying to take it serious. I'm playing the long game. Like, I want to be a killer, like 85's national player. That's like what that's what I'm like shooting for. I don't have the talent to have been like a great junior player or a great college player or a great like open level, men's player, but watch out. In like 40 years, I'm gonna be dominating the national. That's what I'm shooting for, the national scene.
I like that. I like playing the long game. I think that makes sense. No, my father is completely tennis nerding out in recent 10 years. So my stepfather, but we're super close. But he's been, he replaced both knees, and now he's running like a boy again, pretty much. So, and
Wow.
he plays tennis as much as I do. I mean, he would play every day if he could, But so he's going for also like 85. So we'll see. He's 65 now, so he has like 20 years to improve a lot. We'll see how it goes.
Attaboy.
No,
I love that attitude.
Yeah, you kind of like that people, anyone who shows like a dedication, passion to improve in whatever really in life, especially at an older age, I think is even more impressive. It's just like heartwarming. I think that's such a thing.
Totally agree.
I've been taking a lot of your time on the 4th of July. We've had a huge lag. I don't know what's up with my internet. I never had any problems before, but yesterday was also weird with Rick, or 2 days ago. Yeah, I'm sorry about the lagging issue. Probably on my end, apparently. But we've managed it pretty well, because it's not that easy to converse fluid, like in a fluid way, when there's like, it's like you're on this space station and I'm here down on Earth, and we're trying to find like a common ground to hear each other.
No, you did really well. You wouldn't know this unless you've like studied it or you've done it yourself. But there's a whole skill set to interviewing. I can tell, you've been in media and you've worked on it and you've been intentional and mindful about it. You did a really fantastic job. Same with all the rest of your content. I love watching your stuff. Really a pleasure talking to you today, and hopefully your audience gets some value out of it and they enjoy it.
Yeah, when it's from you, I'm sure they will get value out of it, and I really got value out of it myself. So if you want to check out Ian's stuff, if you haven't already, essentialtennis.com, and there's the Essential Tennis YouTube channel, Real Tennis, a bunch of channels. There's Instagram and all that stuff, but you'll find it through Essential Tennis. He's also written a book, which I've read, which is great, called Essential Tennis. So we're making it easy for you guys to find him out there in the ether. So big thanks, and happy 4th of July, Ian, and I hope to talk to you again with less lag.
Thank you, Jonas. It was a pleasure. I'm happy to have another conversation anytime. You're doing a fantastic job. Keep up the good work with your content, and hopefully people watching enjoyed our talk. Thanks a lot.